Distinguished guests, excellencies, colleagues, friends, and speakers. It is with great pleasure that I welcome all of you today to the Global South and Bandung 70 International Conference, a gathering that brings together scholars, diplomats, and practitioners to reflect on one of the most influential moments of the 20th century, the Bandung Conference of 1955, and its enduring legacy 7 decades later. In 1955, at the midst of the Cold War, 29 African and Asian nations gathered in Bandung, Indonesia, for the historic Asian African Conference, later known as the Bandung Conference. Representatives of these newly independent states, united by a shared sense of purpose, solidarity, and common principles, aimed to rethink the emerging post-World War II international order and to articulate alternatives to a global system dominated by rival superpowers. The conference inspired what would later be called the Bandung Spirit. Although never formally codified, this concept captures a call for peaceful coexistence among nations, liberation from all forms of domination, and the affirmation of the right to self-determination. It underscored the equality of all races and nations, the importance of solidarity with the poor, the colonized, the exploited, and the marginalized, on the pursuit of emancipation through development rooted in the shared interests of peoples. Although the Bandung Conference did not establish a formal mechanism to implement its recommendations, it nonetheless charted a path forward in two distinct yet complementary directions. Politically, it laid the foundations for the non-aligned movement created in Belgrade in 1961, which sought to provide a collective voice for countries unwilling to align with either of the two Cold War superpowers. The movement championed key principles such as anti-colonialism and self-determination, respect for sovereignty, and no interference, the eradication of discrimination and the apartheid, and the pursuit of general and complete disarmament, the strengthening of the United Nations, and the promotion of economic development. Economically, Bandung's legacy contributed to the establishment of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development in 1964, an institution dedicated to promoting inclusive and sustainable development, especially for developing nations. It also led to the creation of the Group of 77, known as the J77, which brought together emerging countries to articulate a unified voice for the Global South through coordinated positions on global economic issues and joint strategies in multilateral negotiations. The J77 strengthened the collective influence of its members within global governance. Until the early 1980s, the Bandung Spirit achieved noteworthy progress, including the delegitimization of colonialism and racism, and the advancement of efforts toward the new international economic order. However, the 1981 Cancun Summit, convened to discuss the Brunt Report, marked a turning point for the Global South. Despite the high expectations surrounding it, the summit produced no meaningful outcomes. Soon after Mexico's 1982 debt default ignited a wider debt crisis that severely weakened the economies of the Global South and derailed momentum toward establishing a more equitable international economic order. In post-Cold War era, the position of the Global South as a group was deteriorating. However, the BRICS and later the BRICS Plus emerged as both a symbol and a strategic instrument of the Global South. advancing the interests of developing countries by promoting economic alternatives, institutional reform, and political multipolarity. Today, the international order established after World War II is confronting deep challenges and undergoing profound transformations. Regional powers from the global south, such as India, China, and Brazil, among others, are rising and acquiring growing economic, political, and military influence on the global stage. Meanwhile, Western dominance is relatively diminishing. Combined with divergent strategic perspectives between the United States and the European Union, ongoing conflicts and instability across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, together with non traditional security threats and persistent trade disputes between the United States and China, have further unsettled the global environment. A perceived US retreat from global leadership has also fueled uncertainty and skepticism towards international institutions. Collectively, these dynamics signal a transition toward what many describe a new international order, in which emerging powers and regional actors are assuming greater prominence and articulating their own visions for global governance. As the Bandung Conference reaches its 70th anniversary in 2025, it becomes both timely and essential to ask, what has the Global South truly achieved since Bandung? In an era of accelerating global change characterized by geopolitical fragmentation, economic realignments, climate emergencies, and enduring inequalities, the Bandung spirit and its fundamental principles of solidarity, non alignment, and South South cooperation call for renewed and critical reflection. Is the Bandung spirit still relevant today? Or does our current moment require a Bandung Plus, renewed framework that reinterprets its original principles to address the complex challenges of the contemporary world? In this context, can BRICS Plus be seen as a new institutional voice for the Global South? If so, to what degree does it genuinely represent the diversity, agency, and development aspirations of the peoples of the Global South, rather than merely advancing the strategic interests of its largest member states? At the same time, what role does the non-aligned movement play in today's era of multipolarity and techno nationalism? Has it outlived its purpose? Or can it be re envisioned as a third way, distinct from both the old Cold War divisions and the emerging rivalries among great powers? Finally, as the concept of a new international order gains momentum, particularly in the discussions on UN reforms, global financial restructuring, and equitable green transitions, what role should the Global South play in this evolving framework? Will it remain on the margins, or can it emerge as a unified force capable of sharing new norms for global governance? Distinguished guests, speakers, and friends, the Moroccan Institute for the Global South is honored to welcome 15 distinguished speakers from 4 continents who will share their insights, perspectives, and contributions to the ongoing dialogue on the legacy and the spirit of Bandung, as well as the role of the Global South. Over the next 2 days, I encourage everyone to participate actively and listen attentively. Let this conference serve not only as a platform for learning, but also an opportunity to connect across borders, generations, and academic disciplines. The Moroccan Institute for the Global South expresses its deepest gratitude to all our speakers and participants who accepted our invitation with enthusiasm, placed their trust in us, and supported our mission. Your contribution will forever be part of the history of our institute. Once again, Welcome and thank you for joining us on this meaningful journey.